Hi guys, welcome to Westmonster Uncensored. I'm Michael Heaver.
I'm Patrick Christie's.
And so much to talk about on today's show. We've got Brexit, we've got Juncker, EU expansion, the very latest from Nigel Farage, and Morrissey with some very interesting comments that I know a lot of you are interested in from the huge reaction we've had on our Twitter and Facebook pages. And guys, as ever, dive in, tell us what you think. What's on your mind? Are you nice and sunny? I know a few of you already commented saying you're having a lovely day, certainly nice here in Westmonster Towers. But we start with a very, very interesting story, guys. You know, I've not seen too much of this elsewhere, but a huge story in terms of the European Union and European politics as a whole. Patrick?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is the news that the European Union, a bit like our universe, is intent on never-ending expansion. But of course, just like our universe, is it about to be sucked into the vortex of a black hole and wiped off the face of history forever? These are the big questions that we're tackling here at Westmonster, of course. It's emerged that Jean-Claude Juncker, our dear leader, has said that Albania and Macedonia should start accession talks. So basically, they're looking to open up the open arms of the lovely, fluffy, liberal European Union to the West Balkans. Now, this clearly will maybe be a talking point for many of you, so if it is, then please do get in touch. Give us your news and views. It's an interactive show here. But yes, look, in a nutshell, some of these countries, Albania and Macedonia, look like they could be about to start the process of joining the Brussels bloc. There's obviously a lot of issues surrounding this. We're going to get stuck into them for you now.
Yeah, Juncker basically saying, talking about opening up to the Western Balkans, and the European Commission formally basically approving opening up accession talks with the likes of Macedonia and Albania. Now, you might have thought, guys, because I'm sure a lot of you, I know a lot of you, are very rational, intelligent, sensible people. You might have thought that when you've got the likes of Viktor Orbán in Hungary, when you've got the Freedom Party in Austria, when you've got a European election after European election, just look at Italy as another example. You've got Eurosceptic forces rising right across the country. You've got the European voters incredibly worried about open door mass immigration, incredibly worried about the EU's continuing power grab, that they might have stopped in Brussels for a second and just thought, wait. Maybe we've got this wrong. Maybe the people of Europe don't want a continually growing economic, political beast that takes powers from member states. No, they're looking to expand. They're looking to expand their empire, to open it up to the likes of Albania and Macedonia. It is crackers.
Well, look, JD Curtis has been in touch. I think you're one of our American listeners, JD Curtis, so thank you very much for tuning in from the States. Brussels is tone deaf, so you're absolutely bang on. And we've had Anthony Pratt saying, phew, we're leaving just in time. And Chris Lane, great. 2 more massively wealthy countries joining. Lol, glad we're getting out. And that brings me to a point I'd like to make about this. Who's paying for all this, really, when you think about it? If the European Union is so desperate to get as much money from the UK cash cow as possible on the way out of the door, why do they really need this money? Because it seems like they're obviously just swimming in cash, doesn't it? If you can massively prop up all these little minnow nations around the world. And really, I think what is going to happen here, I want to know your views on this, of course, but it looks a little bit like we're about to be confronted with a situation where the European Union is almost like, through soft measures and a nicey approach, actually quite firmly reinforcing and spreading its own political ideals out across the world. I think what we're going to see if, let's say, where these countries, Macedonia, for example, Albania, do join, I think what you'll see is the EU would fund a lovely infrastructure project in their country. They'd probably get a cracking new set of motorways, maybe a bridge or 3. And then actually, because of that, these countries would then owe the EU something, wouldn't they? They'd like to think that because of the money that's been thrown at them, the people that live in those countries would all of a sudden just become more liberal. Well, hasn't really worked in Poland, hasn't really worked in the Czech Republic, hasn't really worked in Hungary. So, interesting strategy this from the EU.
But it isn't, and guys, if you're enjoying the show, by the way, do give us a like, do give us a retweet as ever. We're looking now at another country that you may have heard from Ramona's, quite unbelievable. They sort of played down the prospect of Turkey joining the European Union, if you remember, during the EU referendum. Well, no. Germany's EU minister, and again, you can go and see all of this at westmonster.com, Germany's EU minister actually talking up the prospect of Turkey still potentially joining, saying that the EU shouldn't be shutting the door, saying that it could still be on the cards. It's quite unbelievable, guys. We are going to bring you the very latest on Turkey because, Patrick, things are really out of control with what's going on with Turkey, what's going on with the EU and with Greece. As I say, the German EU minister talking about the prospect of Turkey joining the European Union. And amidst that backdrop, guys, unbelievably, and you can, as ever, go and see this story on Westmonster. Unbelievably, Turkish fighter jets harassing the Greek Prime Minister's helicopter. And while this is all going on, this was yesterday, while this is all going on, of course, the European Union has been funneling billions of pounds into the back pocket of Turkey's Islamist dictatorship, basically, to prepare them to join the European Union. I mean, the whole thing's mad.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for 1 second, can you just imagine being Greece? And actually I can, because I am half Cypriot, so full disclosure there, and actually it's wonderful. Food's banging. But anyway, on a serious note, imagine being Greece here now. So you are an EU member state, right? But you've got literally in a situation where the European Union has just absolutely shafted you in regards to the migrant crisis, hasn't it? It's basically written off vast swathes of your country to help deal with the migrant crisis. It's got your economy round the proverbials, right there, just playing with them, doing whatever it wants. And then it started to fund, and then we're talking giving billions now, in excess of £9 billion to Turkey, right? It's for accession costs and in addition to help with the refugee crisis, which, as we all know, it just isn't doing. I mean, as an EU member state, what does that teach you about being in the European Union? Can anybody else get the faint whiff of an in-out referendum coming from the Greek politicians here? I don't know. But yes, this in a nutshell is a case where Turkey and Greece always have big disputes over various little islands, and in some cases quite a big island, that being Cyprus. And now the Turks are really ramping up the rhetoric and everything like that, to the point, as Michael's rightly said, where they have stalked the Greek Prime Minister's helicopter with fighter jets. Now, this is all very, very interesting, isn't it? And you may wonder, why would Turkey want to join the European Union? They've got a completely different set of ideals. Well, actually, it's almost like they don't, because Turkey's pretty big on open borders as well, given the fact there's a road that leads directly into Syria called the Jihadi Highway. They're also not that big on accountability, given that President Erdogan, since the military coup, which I think we can all agree was a little bit dodgy, has imprisoned more than 122,000 people and clamped down on the free press. So actually, it looks like it might be a match made in heaven.
Guys, do tell us what you think about what we're saying here. Mandy's saying rotten. It's rotten! And I'm thinking you reflect a lot of the sentiment there.
Europe is a sewer full of rats. That's from Leonard August.
Oh, that's a pleasant thought. David watching from North Cyprus, thank you very much for joining us, David.
Yes,
guys,
David.
Give us a retweet, give us a like, go to westmonster.com/support if you want to support what we do, but give us a like and give us a retweet now. Help spread the word. But I think it just shows you guys, I think it's always important when you hear Ramona's, when let's look at what the European Union is, right? And what it is, and it is an organisation, I think, that you can smell the desperation now. They can see that Eurosceptics are winning at election after election after election. And in a desperate scramble to sort of expand their empire and try and sort of refocus the whole thing, they're looking at expanding. They don't give a monkeys what the people of Europe want. They don't seem to care that the man on the street now wants, to control borders, wants less centralisation in Brussels. No, they want to expand the empire. That's what it's always been about. And I think lots of other evidence we've got that we can show you about this. We also recently had Jean-Claude Juncker talking about, and just to give you a prime example, we keep bringing this one up. When you heard Nick Clegg describing EU army as a dangerous fantasy, well, look, check this story out that we did a while back. This was Jean-Claude Juncker's so-called State of the Union address. There it was. That's the EU's official feed. He was talking about a European Defence Union. He had EU soldiers on the screen.
We've not mocked up that picture.
No.
That's the picture he used.
That's the EU feed, right? So what you've got to sort of consider with this organisation, guys, and it isn't just, it's important for the whole of Europe, but in the context of Brexit and everything else, you've got an organisation here that's giving money to Turkey, that's looking to expand, while Turkey is, bothering with the Greek Prime Minister, harassing the Greek Prime Minister's helicopter with military jets. They're funneling money still into that regime. And you've got this delusional, grandiose plan for an EU army and for expansion. And it's important because you'll hear so many times now that that's not what the EU's about and it's, people have got it wrong. No, the British people had it absolutely spot on. Brexit, I think, is going to lead the way, guys. I think it's an exciting time for our country, and I think where Britain leads, many others will follow. Well,
we've had an interesting comment here. Joe Boyd just saying, crazy EU wants to rule the world again, same as before, but this time with a pen and not the gun. And I think that's quite spot on, actually, in the sense that there is this push for soft power from the European Union, isn't it? When they're giving Turkey, as they have done, £9 billion, or euros, should say. It's not just it's not just as like a golden handshake. It's to exert political influence in that region, as we would see the same with the Balkans. But I want to raise an interesting point here, I think, or at least I think it's interesting, about Vladimir Putin and the relation with the European Union. Now, if you were Big Vlad, and that's a powerful thought, isn't it, for a second, but if you were Big Vlad and you saw that you had essentially a superstate here that was expanding into your satellite states, that was looking to penetrate one of your on-off allies in the Middle East, one that shares a border with Syria, where you have vested interest, would you not see that as a little bit of a threat, especially considering that superpower is openly penning plans for its own military force? So, really, and it actually openly, according to Martin Schulz, wants to become the United States of Europe. So, I mean, there you go. That, to me, seems like it could kick off quite badly. Vladimir Putin might look at that and go, well, this is a bit of a power play. My point here being, the world already seems to be on a little bit of a knife edge. If you were Vladimir Putin, would you let it get to the stage where they had all joined the European Union and they'd all come under the umbrella of one army, or would you try and nip that in the bud early on? For me, it'd be the latter. But what do you think?
Another tweet that just underlines this one more before we move on. There was a Martin Schulz tweet a while ago. I'll bring that up for you there. There you go. Spells it out crystal clear. They were talking about a United States of Europe, bold as brass. And I think it's, as I say, I'll reiterate, it's important to look at what this European Union is doing at the moment. It's important to know that it's funding money into Turkey, who, military jets harassing an EU premier, in the Greek Prime Minister.
Yeah.
It's important to look at the fact that they're looking to expand still, despite after election after election after election, the European public rejecting the EU orthodoxy. They do not get the message. I would argue this is not only an anti-democratic organisation, but people like Jean-Claude Juncker, I think, have totally lost touch with reality. They are detaching themselves. They are convincing themselves that the European Union is some sort of popular project that people across the world admire, that has to expand, that deserves more powers. They have lost the plot. And I truly think, as they talk about expansion to Albania and Macedonia and God knows where else, that where Brexit Britain leads, many others would follow. That's why I think it's an exciting time for democracy in this country and across Europe, because I think I think they've completely lost the plot, and I think a democratic revolution is on the way, and Brexit's the start.
Well, look, guys, we've got a load of your comments coming in here. Fantastic one from Mark Kelly here saying, most EU tanks only have reverse, only the British tanks have forward gears. Fantastic. Kerry Isel just saying, Putin almost looks like a good guy these days. That's interesting, coming from you there. They lost the plot. It's insanity from Yvette Callahan. And this is it. Give every EU state a referendum. That's from David Baker. Well, of course, they couldn't do that, I think, because you'd see a mass exodus. But no, look, guys, I really do think, just to kind of round off that particular segment of this programme, it is interesting times. You've got the European Union here, ever intent on expansion. It does raise the question, who can pay for all this? Who's funding it? Wouldn't Britain have ended up paying for this and funding it if we were still in? That's a valid question to ask. Is this not really a bit of a dicey move with regard to Putin? Also, is it not a bit naive to think that just because you spend a load of money in a particular country, throw some cash at some Albanians and give them an infrastructure set up, that they will all of a sudden turn into left-wing liberals? Not sure that's going to happen.
Sandra with a nice little comment here saying, I love you guys. I put off clothes shopping to hear your news.
Gosh,
it's the only news worth listening to.
Thank you.
That's a ringing endorsement if I ever heard one. Thank you so much for that. Do give us a retweet. Do give us a like. Do go to westmonster.com/support if you want to support us. A very, very important story coming up now, guys, on wages. Because you've heard the doom and the gloom and the project fear and the this and the that. Yesterday, some very interesting statistics came out, basically showing now earnings going up above inflation. And very interesting as well, we've seen slightly lower net migration, still in the hundreds of thousands, but slightly lower. You had an economist here, Jeremy Cook, at World First, chief economist, making this observation, which I think is very important. He said, while most of this improvement has been due to a collapse in inflation, something that should be shown to continue tomorrow, businesses are paying higher wages as the labour market in the UK tightens. Now, what that means is that as you're seeing slightly lower levels of migration, we still want to see them go a lot lower. It's very simple supply and demand, guys, isn't it? If you've got an endless supply of people coming into your country willing to work on minimum wage or close to minimum wage, then employers never have any incentive to raise wages. As you're seeing the labour market tighten, that's sort of the technical term for slightly lower migration, so employees have less choice of people they can base basically pay the absolute minimum to, you're going to see wages rise. And this is starting to happen, and it backs up findings from the Recruitment and Employment Confederation as well, who have actually said that employers are increasing starting pay to draw candidates away from current roles into new positions. Employers are working hard to make themselves attractive to UK nationals. I would put it to you, that is exactly what Leave voters wanted to see, and we're starting to see a little bit of it.
Just coming back to the clothes comment there from our diligent viewer who has put it off. Anthony Pratt said, that's not hard. I've managed to put off clothes shopping for years. Oh, fantastic. Well done.
Lovely job.
Somebody else needs to go clothes shopping. I'm not pointing any fingers, but someone on this panel's lost quite a bit of weight recently and needs to refresh their wardrobe. Don't know who that could be.
Thanks, mate. Look, he's very observational, isn't he?
Yeah, it's not him. But no, look. Ruth O'Donnell, great job, guys. And April Morris hitting the nail on the head with all this Project Fear nonsense, just saying, well, scaremongering did not work. Everything's on the up. British flag, British flag, British flag. Well done, April. But it is interesting, isn't it? Because it does seem like quite basic common economic sense that if you reduce the amount of competition for, say, all of your lowest, more unskilled type of jobs in your economy, then your employers are going to have to start making those jobs seem more attractive to the people that are there to entice them in. One of those is you increase the wages. And also I think this business of, leaving the EU might have a massive impact on workers' rights. I think it could have the polar opposite, because employers, as we've just said, are going to have to start making the jobs more and more attractive to the people that want them. So surely the benefits are going to increase as well, you would have thought. And fantastically, as well as Michael, I believe, is about to go on to real wages, a fantastic confirmation of what we've just been saying. Basically, real wages are rising and they are outstripping inflation, aren't they?
Yeah, so the Resolution Foundation, which is a think tank, basically they're projecting or looking at potential real wage rise of 0.5%, which doesn't sound like a lot, guys, but what this shows you is, once again, all of those people, and I think this is significant, all of those people that told you about the economic doom and gloom, about if you voted leave, about if there was going to be, if the UK was going to leave the European Union, all of these people, supposed experts on economics, have been shown up time and time and time and time again. They're going to be shown up when it comes to wages. They'll be shown up a lot more, by the way, if the government have the balls to bring down net migration to the tens of thousands, because you'll see wages go up by even more. But it shows you, doesn't it, I think, what I take away from it, and let me know what you guys think about this, is what I take away from it is all of those people whose job it is to know about economics and to make these predictions, frankly, they may as well have written it on the back of a fag packet, because they've shown to be clueless. They've shown to their orthodoxy, and then their predictions are shown to have been complete and utter garbage. I would suggest much of it was politically motivated to try and stop you from voting leave. It didn't work. We've seen the reality. The sky hasn't fallen. Bright days are ahead.
Leonard Augustine just saying, nice pink shirt for a beautiful sunny day there, Michael. Whereas we've had here shorts weather, someone says. And also my favourite comment of the day, you've won the favourite comment award already. Hands down, Richard McDonald, just saying, Patrick, you're right as always. So cheers. It's nice that somebody other than myself realises it for a
Don't
day.
encourage him, please. Bloody hell. Right, I've got to deal with that now. Now, just a video for you guys. Nigel Farage in the European Parliament, great speech. We're going to play it now. We'll come back. We'll hear your thoughts on what he has to say. Here it is.
Yeah.
Well, for Brexit voters, this whole thing is a slow, endless agony. We didn't vote for a transition deal. We voted to leave. Now, I'm not in the least bit surprised by the intransigence of Mr Barnier and the EU's negotiating team. They have got to defend their empire, which, of course, is coming under sustained assault from voters everywhere, in particular the recent wonderful results in Hungary. But in the face of all of this, the British have rather blinked, and you get the impression that the Prime Minister doesn't really believe in Brexit. She's just carrying out the will of the people. So I'm concerned that we're headed for a really very bad deal from a British perspective. We've already conceded too much money, too much authority for the European Court of Justice. We're betraying our fishing communities. Oh, and open door immigration, the primary reason we voted Brexit, continues with no end in sight. We're headed for Brexit in name only, so I'm pretty frustrated, and I think 17.5 million people are. But there is one bit of really good news. The George Soros-funded attempt, headed up by Tony Blair and others, to get the British to have a second referendum. You know, the old trick that was tried on Denmark and Ireland in the past, that is now run into the ground. There isn't going to be a second referendum, and we are going to leave on the 29th of March next year. The historic break is coming, And once we're a sovereign country once again, we will be able to unpick this mess. So there's more good news than bad news.
Right, so we've had some comments rolling in there. Tanis Pullen, who's a regular on the show. Cracking to have you back, Tanis. Thank you. Nice to know you're not outside enjoying this warm weather. You're glued to your computer screen. Just says Nigel was brilliant. I loved it. Just moving on to some other ones here. Leslie White says, a lot of politicians are clueless but never get sacked. Amber Rudd. Gavin Smith. When was the last time an economic prediction came even close? No, I wholeheartedly agree with that. Look, these economists that predicted Project Fear, and they said exactly what the world would look like post-Brexit, which is basically a Neolithic apocalyptic wasteland. Where were they when the economic crash happened in 2008? Where were they there being able to see so far into the future? If you were that good at your job, surely you would have foreseen the global economic crash that happened, that renders us all incapable for however long. But no, of course, that shocked you, didn't it? But yeah, so here we are. But I think that's my little 2 pennies worth there for the economists of Britain.
But that's Nigel Farage's view anyway, guys. Basically, that it's George Soros, Tony Blair, elitist, a push, big money behind the push for a second referendum. His view there, that it's dead in the water, it's gone to ground, and as much as Brexiteers may have reservations about the deal, about what's involved in it, in the timescale involved, in his view, Nigel Farage's view, that is, no second referendum is going to happen. We will have Brexit. Do you agree? Are some of you still fearful? Has Nigel reassured you at all that it's going to happen? Do you still think there'll be a second referendum? Let us know. Love to hear what you think about that.
Chris Lane wants Nigel to have a knighthood. Grace Smythe says, hurrah. Well done, Nigel. Mandy Carter. Hello, Mandy. Good to have you back. Saying, loved it. Ha. So excellent. Good stuff there, guys. Interesting to hear. We said as well, Calvin Price, we need the UKIP leader on your show. So I think, Michael, it's time for you to put in a call to Mr. Batten.
Well, we'll have to see, guys. Lots more guests and things, I think, in the next few weeks and months. If any suggestions of who you'd like on the show, etc., do let us know. Now, another story I know that's going to get a lot of you, I think it shows you where we are as a country, and I think a lot of you will have seen this coming, is basically a study done that 1/3 of millennials, well, the young generation, will never own their own home. New research out showing that many may have to rent or live in social housing all their lives. I mean, it really is bad, and it backs up a recent finding, basically from the government, that mass migration has pushed up housing prices by 21% since 1991. And Lindsay Judge from the Resolution Foundation, again, they're saying Britain's housing problems have developed into a full-blown crisis and young people are bearing the brunt. Well, guys, look, I'm sorry, this isn't rocket science, is it? We've just seen the biggest population growth for 70 years. It was 538,000 in a year. It was 62% attributed to net migration. If you're going to have hundreds of thousands of people net migration each year, that is going to place a huge burden on your housing stock. It's going to fuel demand. It's going to push up prices. It's going to make it very hard, if not impossible, for your average young person to get that deposit together to be able to afford to buy their own home. I'm sorry, it's supply and demand. Like with so many other things we talk about here, it's so obvious. If you have a population explosion, even if the government got 100,000 or 200,000 houses built, how much of that will just be taken up by the amount of people coming into your country net each year if you go on with this crazy level of migration?
Joe Boyd suggested that we have Douglas Murray on the show. That's an interesting one, actually, something we should probably look into. It's a good shout.
Thank you for that.
Lord Pearson, someone said, oh, I think you missed the boat on that one. He was on. So, anyway, look, with regards to this, and it does tie me into what we're going to come on to talk about next, a seamless segue, almost like I'd planned it, is that with this housing crisis thing, all the young people that voted for Brexit, and they do like to tell us that it was all the young people, don't they, because it's the old people's fault, which of course isn't true. But anyway, they've said that, it's interesting that they have now walked into a situation where they are, because they are Remainers, a lot of them feel they're just not allowed to mention immigration, which is not a policy that works in any other day-to-day form of life, does it? If you're running a business, you have to deal with every single segment that goes up of making your business. You have board-level meetings about it, you have big chats about it, and you have a clear strategy. But what a lot of the left have done is rendered the immigration topic completely unspeakable. They've said that you're not allowed to have a chat about it because you will just be called racist. But actually the reality of the situation is that immigration is having a massive impact on Britain's housing stock. And are those young people content, those same kind of loudmouth young people, a little bit like me, but from the opposite end of the political spectrum, of course, Are they content to rent all their lives? Are they content for there to be a massive, never-ending housing shortage that presumably, over the course of the next however many decades, could just get worse and worse and worse because they're not able to have the discussion about migration? It's interesting. I'm not quite sure where they are on that, really.
Got David here. Get Owen Jones on the show. He'll last all of 5 minutes. As we know, guys, if you are a snowflake, you will melt around here quite quickly because what you get here is the cold hard facts, the cold hard truth. No matter how uncomfortable, no matter how unpalatable it is for some people, this is what's going on in the world. We bring it to you here, of course, on Uncensored, 1 o'clock UK time, Monday, Wednesday and Friday. Give us a like, give us a retweet. If you support what we do, go to westmonster.com/support.
David Baker, I love it when this happens. It's almost like you were in the studio with us. Get Morrissey on the show. Ask and you shall receive, my friend. Here comes a little bit of Morrissey just for you. He has come out, the rocker, the former Smiths frontman, the legend himself, has come out and spoken out against the loony left. He said, as far as racism goes, the modern loony left seems to forget that Hitler was left-wing. But of course, we're all called racist now, and the word is actually meaningless. It's just a way of changing the subject, he goes on to say. And a quote should be flashing up on your screen. There it is now. When someone calls you racist, what they are saying is, you actually have a point. I don't know how to answer it, so perhaps if I distract you by calling you a bigot, we'll both forget how enlightened your comment was. And I think that is fascinating, isn't it? How many times do you have that where just by virtue of talking about the fact what your views may be on the scale of immigration, what your views may be on exactly what our border policy should be, how we should set out our immigration policy, just by virtue of bringing that up very often, you are now regarded as racist. You are the idiot at the dinner party, aren't you? Although I imagine for both of us that's a regular occurrence anyway. But
speak for yourself.
But I find it, well, as long as I'm at a dinner party with you, everything's fine.
Yeah.
But no, look, that's it, isn't it? And I think that's very damaging for society. That's something I would say. If you can't have a discussion about these issues perfectly rationally and sensibly, then you're sleepwalking towards disaster.
Yeah, huge reaction for the quote from Morrissey. I think for a lot of you guys, interesting to hear from someone who's sort of in that industry, who's not just parroting the same old boring lines, because of course now increasingly it's a society where no one says anything original. If they do actually dare to say something that's actually how they feel, they get shot down and then make one of those grovelling, pathetic apologies. Oh, well, I'm sorry that people are outraged about what I said.
Yeah.
And I think it's, to have a bit of a straight shooter there, not back down and just call it out. I think it's had a massive response from in terms of our
absolutely. It's completely devalued the word, hasn't it? Because there are genuine racists out there, aren't there? There are genuine idiots and horrible, horrible people out there. Your Nick Griffins of this world. You're actual out-and-out disgusting, vile racists. Right. Well, if you then bracket in with that same word racism, anyone that just has a view on immigration, well, then what's the point of that? What have you achieved? It's absolutely baseless. It nullifies the meaning of the word, in my opinion. There is also another little thing that Morrissey went on to talk about, which I know that you don't agree with.
Oh, well, it's...
You don't find it... Michael doesn't find it too funny, and I'm sure he'll explain this in a minute, because he's not wrong, right? But...
it's slightly snobby comment, I thought.
I find it absolutely hilarious. He says, Morrissey goes on to say that criticises basically this current state of politicians and says that not even Tesco's would employ Diane Apper.
Nothing wrong with working at Tesco's. People graft their bollocks off a lot more there than some of the people we see around this country sitting on their arse on chunky salaries. So,
very true.
But I take the point. I mean, you wouldn't exactly trust someone like that at a checkout. And I mean, you might get a discount, you might get overcharged.
Well, if she's anything like she is at PMQ, she'll either be asleep or on her phone, so I imagine she wouldn't last long.
Well, on that note, guys, give us a retweet, give us a like if you enjoyed it. Go to westmonster.com/support if you have enjoyed the show. We will enjoy the sunshine, by the way. I think a lot of people are out enjoying the sunshine. So go out there, get your shopping done. We won't hold you back here any longer. Go and get some sun, have some fun. Visit Westmonster, of course, for all the latest news. And we'll see you on Friday at 1 o'clock. And who knows what will happen by then, but we'll be talking about it.
Have a Pims on me, guys.
See you later, guys.